Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying Volume 9. We just started this book last week. It's titled The Six Sense Bases. This is where you're diving in to understand the mental object of sensual desire. Whenever we talk about craving, desire, attachment, wants, expectations, the way the mind is longing, yearning, having that unquenchable thirst, forming its inner feelings based on some condition, it's all about sensual desire. There are desires that the mind can have that aren't sensual desires, but by and large, the vast majority of everything the mind is longing, yearning, and craving for has sensual desire in it. So it's helpful to dive into this book and understand the teachings of the Buddha on this important topic. By studying with the original words of the Buddha, you can see what did he share and understand his teachings, and then be able to understand what he didn't share as well. This is going to help you to make your way towards enlightenment. So the way that we do this program is I invite students who are in Zoom to be able to read a chapter from the book. Then I share some teachings on that. Then I open up to any and all questions that you guys might have related to that chapter. Today we're in chapters 11 through 20. So if there's anyone in Zoom that would like to volunteer to read, you're more than welcome to. And then as we get to the question period, anybody who's on Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you're welcome to ask questions by putting that into the comment section. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask questions that way as well. So it looks like Pat raised his hand for volunteering to read. So go ahead, sir.
Thank you. With destruction of excitement, the mind is liberated. Seeing rightly, he experiences the fading away of strong feelings. With the destruction of excitement comes destruction of craving. With the destruction of craving comes destruction of excitement. With the destruction of excitement and craving, the mind is said to be well liberated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. So this is a great little chapter to help you understand that the pleasant feelings that the mind experiences is just as much a part of the problem as the painful ones. Now remember, we're talking about conditioned feelings here. What the unenlightened mind is doing because of its sensual desire is it's chasing and chasing and chasing. It wants gratification, and it has this longing, this yearning, this wanting and expectations of things to be a certain way. And if the mind gets what it wants, it gets those pleasant feelings, but those are conditional, that they arise, they change, and they fade away. So if it's sunny outside, the mind gets so happy or excited. Or if your boss gives you a raise or a promotion, you get so happy or excited. Or if your mom calls you up and says, hey, I'm going to come visit you this weekend, you get so happy and excited. And those are conditioned pleasant feelings. That's what the Buddha is talking about here when he's describing excitement. The problem with these conditioned pleasant feelings is they're only temporary, that essentially those conditions that the mind is forming its pleasant feelings on are going to change. So if you allow the mind to get so happy and excited when it's sunny outside, your boss gives you a raise, or your mom's coming to visit you, when all those things change, now your mind's going to end up in the painful feelings. Your happiness is going to be gone. This is why you haven't been able to get to permanent happiness, because the mind is holding on to this temporary happiness. So when you get excited if it's sunny outside, that means when the weather changes due to impermanence, which everything around you is going to be constantly changing, now you're going to experience the painful feelings. Or if your boss, instead of giving you a $20,000 raise, maybe the next year he only gives you, or she only gives you, a $3,000 raise. And now you're frustrated or agitated because you expected more, you wanted more, and you got so excited the previous year with that money. Or if your mom calls you up and says, "Oh, I'm so sorry, something's come up, I can't come to see you." Well, if you allowed your mind to get excited when mom was coming to see you, now when she changes her mind, now you're going to be in those painful feelings. So you need to be able to see that the conditioned pleasant feelings are just as much a part of the problem as the painful ones, so that way you can work to eliminate the conditional experiences where the mind's having excitement and get to the unconditioned happiness, the unconditioned joy, where the mind can just be happy all the time. Because what the mind is doing is it's laying out all these conditions. If the weather is this, if my boss does this, if my parents do this, if my bank account is this, so forth and so on, if my kids do this, then I'll be happy. But all those conditions can't be met permanently due to impermanence. So now, when the mind's not experiencing all those conditional experiences, the mind ends up in the painful feelings. So the solution for this is to be developing the 4 foundations of mindfulness, being aware of the bodily sensations that are arising where the mind is about to form a conditioned feeling. When you understand the 4 foundations of mindfulness of bodily sensations, feelings, condition of the mind, and mental objects, you can be aware of those bodily sensations that are arising where the mind is alerting you as an early warning system that it's about to form a conditioned feeling. And then you can cut that off and let it go through applying right effort. So essentially what the mind's telling you with those bodily sensations is, hey, I'm about to form a conditioned feeling. I'm about to form a conditioned feeling. I'm about to form a conditioned feeling. And you say, no, I'm not going to let you do that. Well, you're not suppressing your feelings here. You're actually cutting it off and letting it go before it actually becomes a feeling. So with the painful feelings, this is pretty intuitive. People understand, like, yeah, let's get rid of the anger, the sadness, the frustration, the irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, things like this. And those bodily sensations with the painful feelings are much easier to spot typically. As you're developing your mindfulness, you might notice the tingling in the body, the tightening in the chest, tightening in the throat, the heat in the face, or the pressure in the skull. These are all some of the bodily sensations that you could be experiencing as a painful feeling is getting ready to be formed in the mind. But the same thing is occurring for these conditioned pleasant feelings. They're just typically more subtle. They're not as noticeable because the mind really enjoys them. You might have heard the word warm fuzzies, and people kind of like that, where you get that tingling across your shoulders, up the back of the neck, over the skull. This is the bodily sensations associated with the arising of conditioned pleasant feelings. And normally the mind wants to indulge in that because it feels so pleasurable. But you need to be able to see that as just as much a part of the problem, that if you allow the mind to get those conditioned pleasant feelings, then it's only a matter of time before the conditions change and your mind's going to end up in the painful feelings. So you're going to need to have your mindfulness so well developed that you notice those bodily sensations, not only with the painful feelings, but with the pleasant ones too. Because if the mind is unwilling to let go of its temporary pleasant feelings like excitement, then it's not going to ever eliminate the painful ones. So the Buddha is explaining here that seeing rightly, he experiences the fading away of strong feelings. So those strong feelings that the mind is experiencing because of craving, desire, attachment, if you see rightly, meaning you have wisdom of what's truly going on in your mind, then you can train your mind to have those feelings fade away so you get to the point where the mind's always bright, cheerful, glad, and uplifted. And what he's saying is with the destruction of excitement comes the destruction of craving. Because whenever you notice those bodily sensations with the pleasant feelings arising, if you cut that off and let it go with right effort, if you restrain the mind, that's where you're eliminating your craving. Whatever craving is producing those pleasant feelings, that's the same craving that's going to produce the painful feelings and the feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. So you need to be able to do what the Buddha is describing here, which is destroy this conditional excitement. So you can get to the point where the mind can enjoy any aspect of life, but it doesn't have conditioned pleasant feelings. but you won't be able to get to that if you don't have your mindfulness well developed through breathing mindfulness meditation, where you're cultivating the mindfulness and training your mind to let go. And then also the generosity is training your mind to let go. So when you're getting that alert that the mind is about to form a conditioned feeling, no matter whether it's pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, you need to catch it before it actually forms the feeling. Because with the destruction of craving, desire, attachment, wants, and expectations, the longing, the yearning, there is the destruction of that conditional excitement, where the mind can only be excited when certain conditions are met. That's part of the problem. With the destruction of excitement and craving, the mind is said to be well liberated, right? The mind is free now, that it can't only just be happy and excited when these certain things are occurring, but it's free from that, because not only is it going to experience those pleasant feelings, it's going to experience the painful ones. It's free of that. It's now can experience an enjoyment all the time. That's where the mind is cheerful, glad, radiant, bright, and uplifted, because it's not bound and hindered and bogged down by this sensual desire, the craving, desire, attachment. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular chapter. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So it looks like Chris has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Hello. After the four foundations of mindfulness recognizes discontentedness or the rising of discontentedness, is this when a person would use the seven factors of enlightenment to cut off the craving or discontentedness?
So what you would like to do is, with your mindfulness, awareness of mind, that you apply right effort to cut off and let go. That's what you want to do. You would like to, some people need to redirect the mind, but over time you'll be able to internally just almost flip a switch and cut that off and let it go. But early in practice, you need to redirect the mind. Now, as the mind is eliminating the arising of this conditioned feeling, if you notice that you haven't been able to do that, now it actually forms a feeling, and now you notice the condition of the mind, that third foundation of mindfulness. That's where you apply the seven factors of enlightenment, that you bring in the tranquility, the concentration, and the equanimity. Those seven factors of enlightenment are when you're noticing that the condition of the mind for a few minutes or a few hours is either sluggish or excited, you can bring those in. You're always practicing your mindfulness, but in the moment, when you're noticing the bodily sensations, you're cutting off and letting go, redirecting the mind. And then that's where, if you're noticing that the mind is having the feeling or the condition of the mind, that's where you bring in the seven factors of enlightenment to rid the mind of that.
So the condition of mind, it lasts for a couple minutes to a few hours?
Yeah, it can even last days or even weeks. The condition of the mind is a more long-term aspect of the mind, where the bodily sensations are usually pretty finite. I've seen them last as long as 8 to 10 seconds, but that is after you have your mind really well trained. Early on, people don't even notice the bodily sensations. It just blows past those right into the feeling. The feeling is actually the forming of the feeling, and now if that feeling sticks around for anything more than a minute or two, now it's starting to affect the condition of the mind, which is the third aspect of the four foundations of mindfulness.
And then the mental objects is months to years? How long?
The mental objects are deeply rooted containers in the mind. Those 10 fetters are all mental objects. So here, the mental object is the sensual desire. So in this case, if you experience the arising of excitement and you weren't cutting it off as a bodily sensation, or even if you did, if it formed a feeling, if it affected the condition of the mind, you need to have enough awareness of mind that you can look at what just happened and figure out that this was your central desire. Or another mental object that people are familiar with typically is conceit. You need to have awareness of mind to be able to see, like, that's my conceit. I'm not interested in that. So the mental objects are the fetters. You need to have awareness of the symptoms of those, and that will help you to be able to now apply proactive training to be able to eliminate those and uproot those out of the mind, because these are deeply rooted containers in the mind.
So just one last question. If the seven factors of enlightenment is what a person would use to eliminate conditions of mind. What would a person use to eliminate mental objects? Is that just the general practice?
Each one is different. You need to have the Eightfold Path well underway, but each fetter, each mental object is different because you've got personal existence view, wrong behavior and observances, doubt. You've got central desire, ill will, desire for form, desire for formless, conceit, restlessness, and ignorance. So each one of those have different symptoms. Each one of them have different remedies to them. That's what I teach in the August retreat, where I spend an hour, hour and a half on each individual fetter, making sure you know what it is, the symptoms, how to eliminate it, and how to know that you've eliminated it. So you need to have the Eightfold Path well underway. That's a given, that's a foundation. But then ultimately, how to eliminate and target each individual fetter is going to be unique to each individual fetter.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Marcy, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Teacher David. It says here, with the destruction of excitement and craving, the mind is said to be well liberated. As the mind is training, with the breathing mindfulness meditation and things, does there come a time where the mind, the arising of these bodily sensations will dissipate?
You mean like they won't be there at all anymore?
Yeah, they'll fade away.
Yeah, they are impermanent. But ultimately, when you get rid of all your cravings, desires, attachments, when the mind's completely purified, it's enlightened, you won't have the arising of bodily sensations associated with craving because there's no cravings there. All the causes and conditions that are producing it have been eliminated. You'll still have bodily sensations like an itch, or if you stumped your toe, you're going to feel that as pain. But in terms of these tingling sensations, the bodily sensations associated with contact through the sense bases that's triggering a craving, desire, attachment, you won't have those bodily sensations.
Okay, thank you, Teacher David. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's when the Buddha says like everything becomes cool right here. That's what he's talking about in that discourse, that, initially as you're making your way to enlightenment, you're so vigilant and so aware of those bodily sensations. But eventually when you get all the cravings out of your mind, everything's just cool and calm and tranquil. There's just nothing but equanimity. There's no arising of, that feeling that you get when discontentedness is arising.
So, if you don't mind, Teacher David, one more quick question. So, I noticed that the other day I took my family out to dinner to a Thai restaurant, and it was kind of pretty much like just pay whatever you would like to pay. No issue there. But I did notice that the mind at one point was running quickly to the Venmo to see who paid what, and then I kind of put the phone down, and then I said to myself, all right, Marcy, what is Marcy the being craving right here, right now, that's wanting to know, who paid what? And I was able to kind of just like cut it off and let it go. And, from there, I haven't even checked my Venmo because I don't, at this point, I don't mind. It was generosity. I was practicing and I didn't have a thing. But I'm noticing that the mind instantly now is just instantly, instead of like looking outward, it goes like right inside to me. Like, what is going on here? What's this? What's this? What's this? And then it's like, boom, all right, cut it off, let it go, move on. And is that normal in a sense when the progression happens?
Yeah, when you start having more mindfulness, you're going to start looking more inward, being more introspective. The mind almost becomes automatic, that whenever it notices a bodily sensation, it doesn't even have to think about it, it just cuts it off. But there's work that one needs to do to be able to get to that point, but ultimately that's what you'll experience.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Teacher David. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, looks like Robert has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, it's actually Michelle. But I had a question. I wanted to make sure if I understood correctly. Is it, can you have excitement without craving? And is that for example, like a week ago when we were on a video call, like a cat had run by and I was like, oh, look, David, a cat. But like, if a cat hadn't run by, I wouldn't have felt sad or anything. It was a bit of a silly example, but do you understand what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, it's helpful to understand conditional excitement, the arising of conditional pleasant. There's going to be a rising, there's going to be a changing, and then there's going to be a fading away. Excitement that you might be familiar with now is conditional excitement, but there's a way to enjoy things without having a conditional pleasant feelings. This is where the mindfulness comes in. And you're just getting started on the path, so your mindfulness might not be developed enough to be able to observe and discern the difference between a conditional pleasant feeling and just enjoying something without this conditional pleasant feeling. So this is where you have to look inward to be able to see what was going on when that cat walked by. Was there this arising of a feeling? Was there a changing, and was there a fading away? And if not, then that could have been the mind just enjoying the experience without having a conditional pleasant feeling.
Makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let me see if we have any questions on Facebook or YouTube. Hello, everyone. Let's see. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere else. Would someone like to read this next chapter, chapter 12? Okay, looks like Marcy. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. Craving desire is the root of discontentedness. Whatever discontentedness arose in the past, all that arose rooted in craving desire, with craving desire as its source, for craving desire is the root of discontentedness. Whatever discontentedness will arise in the future, all that will arise rooted in craving and desire, with craving desire as its source, for craving desire is the root of discontentedness. Whatever discontented arises, all that is rooted in craving desire has craving desire as its source, for craving desire is the root of discontentedness.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So here, the Buddha is just making it very clear for you to make sure you understand that any time the mind is discontent, whether it was in the past or if it's in the future or right now, it's all being caused by one's own mind's craving, desire, attachment, the wants, the longing, the yearning. And this can be really eye-opening, and it can also feel, really, sometimes the mind can feel somewhat guilty and shameful about this when you first start learning about this. Because if you look back over your life, I'm sure there's been situations where you've been adamantly arguing with people, trying to convince them to stop doing what they're doing because your mind thought that they were making you angry or frustrated or agitated. You might have had knockout, drag down fights. You might have lost relationships over this, where the mind has been bitter and harsh and hostile in the past. But if you look back over your past, any situation, all the way from birth, when you were experiencing discontentedness, it was always craving, desire, attachment. The mind was craving permanence. Think back to when we were in the womb of our mother's stomach, that we were in there hanging out, all by ourselves, this cushy place. We had the whole place to ourselves. We had food being pumped in on the umbilical cord. Oh man, things were great. And next thing you know, we get pushed out into the world, or we have surgery and we're brought out into the world. And right away, we're crying and crying and crying. Because of that impermanence that we experienced, our mind was craving permanence. And we got this big dose of impermanence and we started to cry right away. And then as we were aging, we asked mommy and daddy for chocolate and ice cream, and we sometimes got it. And we were so happy and excited. Oh, mommy and daddy, you're the best mommy and daddy ever. But then at some point we said, mommy, daddy, can we have chocolate and ice cream? And they said, no, you can't. You're the worst mom and dad ever, right? So anytime we've been discontent in our entire life, it's always been from our own mind. But the unfortunate thing is, due to our lack of wisdom in the unenlightened state, we firmly believe that our discontentedness is coming from other people. And we will hold on to that belief because our mind's ego is unwilling to see that it's our own mind through craving, desire, attachment, and we lack wisdom. So as someone is getting on this path and as you're learning the Four Noble Truths, it's so important to be able to have that breakthrough, to be able to see what's truly causing your discontentedness so that then you can actually fix it. So any discontentedness you experienced in the past, you need to be able to look at some of those incidents to be able to independently verify for yourself that it's your mind that is causing these discontent feelings based in craving, desire, attachment. And then between now and enlightenment, you're going to experience some discontentedness, right? You can't just snap your fingers and instantly get to enlightenment. That's one of the biggest myths about the life story of the Buddha. People think he sat under a tree, meditated, and instantly got to enlightenment. It's actually gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress that's going to lead to enlightenment. So between now and enlightenment, you're going to experience discontentedness. And all of that future discontentedness, it's all based in craving, desire, desire attachment. And what a wise practitioner would do is, rather than look externally and try to blame the people around them for the feelings that they're experiencing, instead look inward. Sit down with yourself and have a conversation. Look inward to try to figure out, what are those cravings, desires, attachments. Once your mind's been redirected, or you cut that off and there's more calmness in the mind, that's an ideal time to look at that. And if you need help, you're always welcome to reach out to me and I'll help you. And the Buddha is also saying, whatever discontentedness essentially that is arising in the present moment, any discontentedness, whether it's with you or with other people, it's all rooted in craving, desire, attachment. And this is also very empowering, not just for yourself, so that you can look at your own cravings and actually solve this problem, but when other people are blaming you for their discontentedness, you'll know with 100% certainty that you're not causing it. No matter what they say, no matter how much they try to put a guilt trip on you or anything like that, you will know that it's their own mind that's causing that. And that's why you can just walk away with a smile. So if the mind continues to believe that it's other people that are causing you to be discontent, you will never solve this problem. You will walk around continuing to think that way, continuing to push people away, be bitter, harsh, and hostile towards them, or put your expectations on people and try to control them. And now you're not going to be able to live harmoniously in all these relationships. So if you can have this breakthrough to be able to see what's truly the source of your discontentedness, then you can actually apply a real solution that's going to actually fix this. And now you can actually experience real results in your day-to-day life. So that's why the Buddha just makes it utterly clear that it's craving, desire, attachment, wants, expectations, this craving for things to be permanent, that's going to cause this discontentedness. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Looks like Chris is submitting a question. Let me see. I think this might be from the last one, or maybe it's this one. Is it equally true to say that discontentedness is caused by not fully practicing the Eightfold Path? No. You would like to be able to look at the root cause. The Eightfold Path is the solution to eliminating craving, desire, attachment. And yes, because somebody isn't practicing the Eightfold Path, there's still going to be craving, desire, attachment in the mind. So from that respect, that's where you're trying to connect this. But you need to be able to penetrate into the exact cause, so that then you notice it with your mindfulness, that your mind is longing, yearning. It's going to feel like it's pulling towards the object of its affection. And that's where you need to have like reins on a horse and pull this mind back and restrain it. Because if you keep allowing the mind to chase after its gratification and chase after those pleasant feelings, you're just going to keep experiencing discontentedness over and over again. And when you're experiencing painful feelings, if you allow the mind to dwell in that, the mind just stays wired to keep having this discontentedness over and over. So you're trying to break this cycle. You're trying to retrain the mind. You're trying to upgrade the operating system in your mind so that it no longer functions this way. You can retrain the mind so that it doesn't form its inner feelings based in craving, desire, attachment. And now this is where the mind can experience liberation, because you can have unconditioned happiness. You can enjoy all aspects of life. Okay, let me see if we have any other questions anywhere. All right, I'm not seeing anything. So let's go to chapter 13. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, looks like Chris and Marcy. Go ahead, Chris.
What one intends, one has a tendency towards. Monks, what one intends and what one desires, and whatever one has an obsession towards, this becomes a basis for the maintenance of consciousness. When there is a basis, there is a support for the establishing of consciousness. When consciousness is established and has come to growth, there is the production of future renewed existence. When there is a production of future renewed existence, future birth, aging, and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair come to be. Such is the cause of this whole mass of discontentedness.
Okay, thank you, sir. So this is a teaching where the Buddha is starting to lead you towards understanding the cycle of rebirth, and that it's craving, desire, attachment that is the cause that's leading to continuous rebirth. Now, I know some of you guys may not have independently verified the cycle of rebirth yet, and that's okay. But here the Buddha is starting to help you to understand what is forming the establishment of this new consciousness, because this is what people have been stuck in over and over and over and over again. It's the cravings, desires, attachments. Here, I think he's using the word obsession, right? Sometimes we think like obsessions or passions are good. That's kind of like what we're sometimes taught, like, oh, I have such a passion for this hobby, or I have such a passion with this life partner, or I have such a passion for this job. Well, if you've ever had those kinds of things, you can see that they actually burn out. And then when they burn out, you're left feeling unsatisfied, or you kind of change directions and go towards something else. So if you had a certain hobby that you were passionate about, you did that for a while, and then your obsession, your craving, desire, attachment burned out, and then you weren't as interested in it anymore. So if you do that with your relationships or with your job or something like this, where you're obsessed with these things, or you have passions towards your life partner or your job, those things are going to burn out. And that's where people get to the certain point in their job and they just don't feel motivated anymore. And they want to quit their job or move to another job because they need that new craving to long and yearn for that new thing. Or they want to move to a new partner. They have this longing, yearning for this new partner. And now a relationship that could otherwise be really wonderful, someone might switch gears and move to somebody else because they have this passion. They want this, this drive, this obsession, and those pleasant feelings associated with having a new partner. So this craving, desire, this longing, this yearning, not only is it causing discontentedness, but it's causing continuous rebirth. And if there's birth, there's going to be this aging, death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. As I mentioned, we're born into the world with craving, and we're born into the world with a lack of wisdom or this ignorance. And because of that, if there's birth, there's going to be aging, death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. And you can get to the point where you escape all of this in this life, and then you won't experience continuous rebirth over and over again. So the way that you can think about this is that if there's a fire with logs and it's sending off sparks, the wind is carrying that spark. And when that spark lands, it's going to ignite a new fire. So this craving, desire, attachment, the mind is holding on and wanting things to be a certain way. It's holding on to this world. It won't let go. And it's not just this world. It's friends, family, relationships, money, jobs, clothing, jewelry. The mind's holding on and holding on and holding on, so it can't let go. But once you extinguish this fuel, when you get this fire that's no longer burning in the mind, you can come to the middle where there can be peace and joy. Because if you're craving, desire, attachment, you're longing, yearning, and chasing those pleasant feelings, if your mind's not doing that, you might be swinging all the way to the other side where there's dullness and lethargic condition. And neither one of those two sides is where there's peace and joy. So there's this middle way where you can gradually work towards goals, objectives, or interests. And as you're extinguishing these cravings, desires, attachments, you can see in your own mind that the situations that you were once in, that now in that situation where you used to be angry or frustrated or agitated, your mind is quite calm and quite peaceful. So you'll know that you're making progress on this path, and you'll see that that fire is being extinguished. And you'll know that there's not going to be these causes and conditions that produce the next rebirth as well. So the Buddha is just walking you through that and kind of giving you a little bit of dependent origination here. For those of you guys that have studied that teaching, he's kind of leading into that a little bit and helping you to be able to see how it's the cravings, the desires, the longing, the yearning that is continuing to maintain this consciousness and allowing it to continue to go forward. And if we continue to allow that to go forward, there's going to be aging, death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. But there's an escape for that, and that's the path to enlightenment in the Eightfold Path, which is going to gradually train your mind to extinguish these fires in the mind. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this one. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom with any questions. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. We have chapter 14. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Vibhav, go ahead, sir.
Do not favor existence, not even for the lasting of a finger snap. Monks, just even a small amount of dung has a foul smell. So likewise, I do not favor existence, even for an insignificant amount of time. not even for the lasting of a finger snap.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So here, this is helpful because there's some places that consider what they're teaching to be Buddhist, and you'll hear people tell you that the goal of this path is to not get to enlightenment, to be reborn, and to come back into the world and help other people to actually get to enlightenment. This is like, I'm not going to learn how to drive a car, I'm going to help other people learn how to drive a car. Well, how could you ever help other people learn how to drive a car if you don't know how to drive a car yourself? So this thinking is oftentimes referred to as a bodhisattva. And you can see in the Buddha's own words that he never taught that, but it's something that you'll see out there that people associate with his teachings a lot, largely in the Mahayana tradition, but you might even see it in the Vajrayana tradition as well. But here with the original words of the Buddha, you can see what he's actually talking about, that he is not favoring existence, because as long as there's existence, as long as there's a birth, there's going to be aging, death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. And that's not to have a pessimistic attitude, because of course a baby comes into the world, it's like, cute little baby, okay, but now this baby's in the world, now it needs to learn how to escape it, right? Because it keeps coming back into the world. And not only are you escaping the world, you're escaping this discontentedness. Because if you got to enlightenment at 7 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old, if you can imagine living the rest of your life with peace and joy and no discontentedness whatsoever. No matter what age we get to enlightenment, even if it's in the last second of our life, that'll be the best second you've ever experienced in your entire life. But the earlier you get to enlightenment, the better, because then you can enjoy the rest of your life with the peace and joy, so you don't have to go around with the anger and frustration and all those other discontent feelings. So here he's saying, just like basically feces or poop or excrement has a foul smell, he's saying so too does existence. And the reason why is because he knows if there's a birth, then that being is going to experience sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. And his ultimate goal is to help lead you to the elimination of discontentedness, which eliminating craving, desire, attachment will eliminate discontentedness, but also eliminating that craving, desire, attachment, that's the same condition that is producing the next rebirth. So it's kind of like 2 for 1. If you eliminate craving, desire, attachment, not only will you see that occurring in this life and you'll see less and less discontentedness, but having eliminated all your craving, desire, attachment, you also have eliminated the causes and conditions that is producing this rebirth. And that's why the Buddha is saying that, because he was helping you to be able to get to this peace and joy in this life, and so that you don't need to experience sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair in a future life. So let me know what questions you guys have here. It looks like Vibhav maybe has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Teacher David. I just want to, can I ask a question about, since you mentioned Mahayana, can I ask a question related to that? Because I had some discussion with my brother who had studied Mahayana, or that's something we can do it even offline. I don't have to ask.
You can ask any questions you like, Vibhav. You know me, I don't have any rules.
No, I'm saying it's for me, it's kind of a little bit off topic in the sense that I can ask a question, you can let me know if you want to discuss it later.
Yeah.
So essentially, the discussion was around, because he studied Mahayana, my brother studied Mahayana texts and everything, and so essentially the discussion came down to whether the Pali Canon, which was in some places, and if you look at the Wikipedia and stuff, they say the Pali Canon was written 400 years after the death of the Buddha. I know you said it's about 100 years, but in the other sources it says 400 years was of oral tradition. And the discussion was whether if something is not in the Pali Canon, or which is considered the words of the Buddha, and but it was written so many hundred years after, whether that can be fully considered the words of the Buddha, or if it's not in the Pali Canon, should you not do something, right? So some of the stuff that is in Mahayana is basically added by other folks, but the question is whether if something is not in the Pali Canon, not in the words of Buddha, should you not do that because it's not stated that way? I guess that's my question.
Okay, so first, I've never said that the Pali Canon was written down 100 years after the death of the Buddha. That they actually had the first Buddhist council within about 3 to 6 months of the death of the Buddha. And that's where 500 enlightened beings came together and they started to start the process of documenting the teachings. And it was Ananda who was credited to have the very best memory to be able to recount most of the discourses of the Buddha. And that's why Ananda shows up so much in the Pali Canon. So we know that the documentation started during Ananda's lifetime, which he lived during the lifetime of the Buddha. So this documentation probably started happening within 6 months of the Buddha's death, because that's when they started to recollect and come together to be able to document his teachings. When it actually went down on some kind of written surface, I don't know that, but they started the process of that shortly after the death of the Buddha. For an enlightened being, once you get to enlightenment, your memory of the teachings that it takes to get to enlightenment is perfect, that you will never forget the teachings that it took for you to actually get to enlightenment by the time you get to enlightenment. It's like upgrading your mind, where the mind is just imprinted with all of this wisdom, and you can't get rid of that wisdom. It's just always there. So these 500 enlightened beings, and there would have been countless enlightened beings during the lifetime of the Buddha, came together to agree on what it was that the Buddha taught at any point in time during his teachings. And oftentimes Mahayana and Vajrayana, they don't consider the Pali Canon to be the original words of the Buddha, and they just say that off the cuff. And that's unfortunate for them, because if they dove into the Pali Canon and they actually studied it through learning, investigating, and examining it, through reflecting on it to verify whether it's true or false, and through practicing it, they will get to the point where they have no doubt that the Pali Canon is indeed the words of the Buddha, because they will see the condition of the mind gradually improving, and they will know that these teachings are leading to an improved state of mind. But oftentimes what Mahayana and Vajrayana tradition are doing is they're doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship and prayer, thinking that that somehow is going to lead to some beneficial result. And that's unfortunate for them that they continue to think that way. But I know with 100% certainty that these are the words of the Buddha, because they will lead to this mental state of enlightenment. But I'm not, looking at trying to convince other people of that. I just make myself available, and I make these resources available. And if someone would like to come see for themselves and investigate the teachings, then slowly but surely they can eliminate their doubt, and they'll know, just like me, that they're 100% the words of the Buddha, because they'll lead them to this enlightened mental state.
Yep, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, looks like Chris has a question. Go ahead, sir.
So when Gautama Buddha talks about not favoring existence for even an insignificant amount of time, am I right in understanding that he's referring to existence in the cycle of rebirth, and he's not referring to any possible existence?
Yeah, whenever he talks about existence, that is in the cycle of rebirth. That's what he's talking about, because he doesn't describe anything beyond that. That's an undeclared teaching. Okay, it looks like...
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Chris. Okay, let me see if we have any questions anywhere else. Looks like Rachel has a question, or maybe you'd like to read. Oh, your hand went away. I can't find you there, Rachel. Did you have something you'd like to say or volunteer to read?
Oh, no, I was just putting up my hand to read.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Sorry.
It's time for that. So I'm just going to scroll
Okay.
forward to this one, and you're welcome to read.
Craving is the fuel of rebirth. I declare Vacha, rebirth for one with fuel, not for one without fuel. Just as a fire burns with fuel, but not without fuel. So Vacha, I declare rebirth for one with fuel, not for one without fuel. Master Gotama, when a flame is flung by the wind and goes some distance, what does Master Gotama declare to be its fuel on that occasion? When Vacha, a flame is flung by the wind and goes some distance, I declare that it is fueled by the wind. For on that occasion, the wind is its fuel. And Master Gotama, when a being has laid down his body but has not yet been reborn in another body, what does Master Gotama declare to be its fuel on that occasion? That when Vacha, a being has laid down this body but has not yet been reborn in another body, I declare that it is fueled by craving. On that occasion, craving is its fuel.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So here the Buddha is spelling it out very clear for you. What is the cause that leads to this next rebirth? It's craving, desire, attachment. That's the fuel. If that is in the mind at the time of death, then there's going to be rebirth, because that's the mind still holding on. That's the mind still longing, yearning. That's why you need to let go of all craving, desire, attachment. And if you do that before before death, you will notice that the mind's completely peaceful and completely joyful. And as you're making your way to that, there's going to be more and more peacefulness as you're getting closer and closer to it. And then, say there's 5 years left or 2 years left, or say there's 20 or 30 or 40 years left of your life, you're going to live in that mental state for the rest of your life. And you'll have confidence that you've gotten to enlightenment because you'll experience 1 year, 2 years, 3 years with no discontentedness whatsoever. And you'll also have the confidence that you're not going to experience rebirth to have this happen all over again. If you are experiencing the same problems over and over and over again in your life, like broken relationships and certain difficulties and struggles continuing to go around and around and around, continue to experience the same broken relationships, the same problems at work, the same struggles in certain relationships, that's the mind not having cultivated the wisdom that it needs to overcome those challenges. So here the Buddha is just making it very, very clear for you that it's craving, desire, attachment that is going to cause this next birth to occur. And if there's craving in the mind, there is going to be what we refer to as ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality. Because for those of you guys that have studied dependent origination, you know that it starts with ignorance, right? So if there's craving, desire, attachment in the mind, that's the fuel, that's the fire that's burning. And there's also this fire of ignorance as well, or this unknowing of true reality, or this confusion and misunderstanding. So let me know what questions you guys have here. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. All right, I don't see any questions. So let's move to the next chapter. Looks like Marcy would like to volunteer for that one. Let me get there. Okay, Marcy, this is chapter 16.
Thank you, Teacher David. With gratification, craving increases. Suppose, monks, a great bonfire was burning, consuming 10, 20, 30, or 40 loads of wood, and a man would cast dry grass, dry cow dung, and dry wood into from time to time. Thus, sustaining that material, fueled by it, the great bonfire would burn for a very long time. So too, when one lives dwelling in gratification of things that can be clung to, craving increases. With craving as condition, clinging comes to be. With clinging as a condition, existence. With existence as condition, birth. With birth as condition, aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair come to be. Such is the cause of this whole mass of discontentedness.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So here the Buddha is essentially saying, as long as you allow the mind to chase after this gratification, you're going to continue to experience continuous rebirth in sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. He's only mentioning rebirth regularly like this because the same things that lead to discontentedness, it's the same cause and condition that leads to rebirth as well. So as long as your mind's chasing after those conditioned pleasant feelings and this gratification and wanting things to be permanently comfortable, then you're going to experience the other side of that, because in some cases you're going to get what you want and the mind's going to get conditioned pleasant feelings, but in other cases you're not going to get what you want, and that's where the sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair come to be. So here the Buddha is showing you a certain section of dependent origination. He's showing you your work. Essentially, craving is what leads to discontentedness. And then he's showing you the intermediary things that are occurring as well. That when there's craving is the longing, yearning for something external. As long as there's that, then there's going to be clinging. Clinging comes to be where the mind holds on. So think about it like when you were maybe single at one point and you were like, I know what I need to make my life better. I need a new boyfriend or new girlfriend. Let me get one of those. And you had this longing, yearning, this craving for a boyfriend or girlfriend. And then maybe you actually got one. And then you started clinging to this person and holding on to them. It's like crushing the relationship because the mind wants this person to be a certain way. Initially, there's no expectations. Everything's great. There's pleasant feelings. You're going to the movies, going to dinner, you're going to the park, having great conversations. There might be intimate contact. Maybe they're calling and checking in on you. When you don't have any expectations, everything's so wonderful. But then the mind starts forming these expectations. This craving and clinging comes to be, and it sets into the mind really deeply. And then that's what leads to discontentedness. And if we leave that in the mind all throughout our life, when we get to the end of this life, there's going to be a new existence. There's going to be birth. There's going to be another birth, which leads to aging and death. And there's going to be more sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. So this is where you can see this cause and effect relationship, because the Buddha is really perfect at showing this cause and effect relationship. So it's that mind chasing after gratification, wanting things to be permanently pleasing, that it sets itself up to fail, essentially. It sabotages its ability to have permanent peace and permanent happiness and permanent joy because it's basing its inner feelings on some external thing. The mind is longing, yearning, chasing gratification. And when you're chasing that gratification, then the craving increases. This is like maybe you started out with wanting $30,000 a year salary, and now you worked really hard in high school or college to be able to get to that 30,000, and now you got it, and you're happy for a period of time, maybe for a few months or maybe even longer, but then the mind craves more and it longs and yearns. That's what the Buddha is saying here, is that craving increases. As long as you try to satisfy that gratification, that 30,000 isn't enough. It then wants 50,000. So now you chase after that for a while. And then you might get it. And now you feel so gratified. You feel like, wow, this chase was really worthwhile. Look at all these pleasant feelings that are coming into the mind. It's almost like justifies the chase. And it feels like, wow, this was so well worth it. Look what I got. I got all these pleasant feelings. But then that fades away, and now the mind wants 80,000, and it chases after that, and it feels disgruntled that it doesn't have this $80,000, right? So what the Buddha is saying is, as long as you chase after gratification, that there's going to be this increase of craving in the mind. Now you're going to be clinging to things, and it's going to lead to more and more discontentedness, and yes, rebirth as well if you don't extinguish it before death. So let me know what questions you guys have. Looks like Kushi has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hello, so I had one question so if we look at dependent origination, there is always going to be contact because we have six sense bases, then feeling, then craving and clinging. So where to break this chain? Because in Four Noble Truths, it says that the cause is the craving itself. But in Four Foundation of Mindfulness, as we discussed today, we cut it off at bodily feeling. So is it at the feeling that we break the chain? Or after knowing the cause of the craving, if you get the question?
Yeah, sure. So the way you dismantle dependent origination is by eliminating the first cause and condition, which is the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. That's why I teach students to focus on the cultivation of wisdom and never believe these teachings. That's usually what I talk to people about right up front on the very first class, even though they don't understand dependent origination, I do. So that's why I'm guiding people to never believe the teaching. So you need to eliminate that ignorance by the cultivation of wisdom. And that's what's going to break the chain of dependent origination. And just to help you understand, you're not cutting off and letting go at the feeling. Of course, if it becomes a feeling, yes, you would like to cut off and let go there, but you would actually like to back that up and be cutting off and letting go as a bodily sensation. If you allow your mind to continue to experience conditional feelings, whether they're pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, you'll never get to enlightenment because the mind's staying wired to keep forming feelings. That's why you need to get ahead of it and cut off and let go at the bodily sensations. Okay, it looks like you're all good with that, Kushi. All right, looks like Chris had some more here in Zoom. He's saying, even if it's a person's own mind that is causing their own discontentedness, can we also cause harm sometimes by making it more challenging for them? You're causing harm if you cause harm to someone's material possessions, to their physical body, or their reputation. You can't cause them to be discontent, and you can't even cause them to be more discontent. You can create an environment, you can create conditions or experiences that will trigger one of their cravings, desires, attachments, but it's still their craving, desire, attachment that is causing that. So like, sometimes parents do things for their children where they see they're attached to maybe like a video game or something like that, and they might take the video game in order to help them to let go of their craving, desire, attachment. If your child gets angry or frustrated about that, you haven't caused the anger and frustration. You've just introduced some impermanence into their life, and now their mind craving permanence. They don't like that, so now they're experiencing the anger and the frustration and any discontentedness. So you can't cause them to be discontent. And in fact, in some cases, if you're really close with people, like a life partner or children or your parents or people like this, you can actually do things very skillfully to help them eliminate cravings, desires, attachments. But you need to know the teachings really well, and you need to know their cravings, desires, attachments really well, because you need to be skillful in these kinds of situations to ensure that you're not causing harm. And you need to make sure that you're not attached to the other person, because when they're getting rid of their cravings, desires, attachments, it's really painful. The way that I think about this is it's like walking through the fire in order to appreciate the fresh air on the other side. You're going to have to walk through some painful feelings in order to get to the peace and joy. Sometimes when we talk about the peace and joy of enlightenment, sometimes people think like, oh, it must be such a lovely walk to enlightenment. Well, yeah, it is, but there's some challenges along the way. Not only do I describe it like walking through the fire to get to the fresh air on the other side, but I also talk about it like joining the mafia. That when you join the mafia, you might get all these pleasant feelings where, wow, I got all these friends, I got this ability to make money, I've got some protection, wow, look at all these great things I got. But when it's time to leave the mafia, if you ever chose to do that, it's really painful to walk out the door because you're leaving behind all those pleasant things, and these people probably are going to want to hurt you too, right? Well, it's the same kind of thing, is that because the mind has formed craving, desire, attachments, and it's been getting these pleasant feelings all along from this relationship or this video game or this jewelry or clothing or money or whatever it is, when your mind's letting go of craving, desire, attachment, it's very painful because your mind is now not getting what it wants. So let me just use a simple example. Like, let's just say someone's attached to a piece of chocolate cake and they've been going to this restaurant, 3 times a week for the last 3 years. And now they've been eating this chocolate cake 3 times a week and their mind's attached to it. And they realize that they need to let it go. Well, when they go to that restaurant and they don't order the chocolate cake, it's going to be really painful for them. It's going to hurt. It's the reason why when an individual breaks up with a boyfriend or girlfriend, it really hurts because that mind is not getting what it wants, which is these pleasant feelings, by allowing the craving to stay intact. But as long as the craving stays intact, not only are you going to have the arising, changing, and fading away of the pleasant feelings, but ultimately you're going to end up in the painful feelings. So it's each individual's mind that is experiencing that. And the longer they hold on to a craving, desire, attachment, the more deeply rooted it's going to be in the mind, and the harder it is to let it go. So that's why as a child, it's really helpful to learn these teachings, because your cravings aren't as deeply rooted and you can more easily let them go. As we age, it's a lot harder to let things go. Chris has some more here. He says, an example would be our 7-year-old son possibly causing harm by misbehaving, acting rowdy, or breaking something. So that's his unskillful conduct due to his craving not being met, and now his ill will is arising, and then he has those wrong behavior and observances. So he's got these 3 fetters that are getting triggered here, right? The central desire, he's not getting what he wants. Now his painful feelings are arising. He's attributing to that something external. His ill will's arising. Now his wrong behavior and observances, those 3 fetters, are starting to function in his mind, are starting to arise in his mind, and now he's functioning unskillfully. And this is why it's so helpful to train when they're actually young. Samantha says, not a question, just an observation, that your explanation in the book is very helpful in pointing out that looking back is just as as full of discontentedness as working on cutting off thoughts of present and future events. I'm not sure I understand 100%, but if it was my words and it's helping you, excellent, Samantha. Let's see, Chris says, does that mean that painful feelings can sometimes increase initially on the path to enlightenment? Yes. As you're making your way to enlightenment, it's painful sometimes. It's very painful as your mind's letting go of these things that it's been holding on to for so long. So that's why you learn all the various tools and techniques to help you so that it can be less painful and that you don't just ignore these cravings, desires, attachments, because the longer you leave them in your mind, the more deeply rooted they become and the harder it is to let them go. All right, Vibhav, you have a question?
I had a question similar to what I think Kushi was trying to ask, if I might try to rephrase it. So in like, when we talk about craving, desire, attachment, we say that craving, desire, attachment is kind of what's causing the craving, desire, attachments are causing the painful and pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant feelings. But in the dependent origination, it's kind of inverted where feelings are the basis for craving. So I guess that's where there's maybe some confusion that I would like to try to understand.
Yeah, so what you guys need to look at with dependent origination is what the Buddha is explaining is how a being comes into the world and how it leads to discontentedness. He's not talking necessarily about what you're going to experience on a day-to-day basis. He's saying that because there's ignorance in the mind in a previous life, there's volitional formations or choices and decisions that were made in your previous life that then led to a consciousness. Now that there's a consciousness, it's going to find a name and form, which is a physical body. And now that there's a physical body, the six sense bases are going to be formed. With the six sense bases, there's then going to be contact that's coming through these six sense bases. Then there's going to be a feeling that is arising because of that. And that's where craving is now established in the mind. The mind then experiences clinging. Then when there's clinging, there's this existence, that this being now exists in the womb. Now that the being exists in the womb, there's going to be birth. And now because there's birth, there's going to be aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. So that's what he's explaining of how a being is coming into the world from causes and conditions from a previous life that now lead to this particular life. So it sounds like maybe you guys aren't understanding dependent origination 100% yet and how to segment it from previous life to current life. And now when you eliminate your ignorance in this life, that's what's going to now create where you still have volitional formations. You're still going to have volitional formations or choices and decisions in this life. But when you dismantle and eliminate and eradicate ignorance, you now have wisdom. So your volitional formations are now wise. And yes, you still have a consciousness and you still have a name and form and you still have the six sense bases and you still have contact through those six sense bases. But you're not going to have the conditional feelings anymore, because you've eliminated the ignorance and you've eliminated the craving and the clinging, right? So because you've eliminated the ignorance and the craving and the clinging, there's no longer going to be discontentedness because you've dismantled this. But these things are still going to occur, meaning you're still going to have contact, you're still going to have the six sense bases. But now because there's no craving in the mind, there's no clinging, there's no discontentedness because your mind is fully awake. You fully eradicated the ignorance or unknowing of true reality.
Sure, thank you.
You're welcome. Looks like Kushi has some more. Go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah, just a follow-up question. So, are bodily sensations different from feelings? Is what we're saying? Then, in five aggregates, when feeling is coming, is it the three types of feeling, or also bodily sensations attached with that?
Okay, so the four foundations of mindfulness and the five aggregates are two different teachings where they both mention feelings, but these teachings are for two different purposes. The five aggregates, or the five criteria, the five elements, the five collections, what these are they are to determine what is a living being and what isn't a living being. That's what's going to help you to be able to practice the first precept and understand not causing harm to living beings. Because all living beings are going to have physical form, they're going to have feelings, Yes, pleasant, painful, neither painful nor pleasant. All living beings have those. Then there's going to be perceptions, which are views and opinions about the world. There's going to be volitional formations, which are choices and decisions. And there's going to be a consciousness or a mind. So that's how you determine what is a living being and what isn't a living being, so that you can practice that first precept of living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. Because anytime you put out harm to a living being, this harm is going to come back to you. So that's what's helping you to figure out what is or isn't a living being. The 4 foundations of mindfulness, this is helping you to understand the life cycle that discontentedness is going through as it's being experienced in the mind. That there's first going to be the bodily sensations, then there's going to be the mind experiencing the feeling. The conditioned feeling is actually formed in the mind. Then if that persists, it's going to affect the condition of the mind more long term for a few minutes, few hours, few days, a couple of weeks. And then it's going to feed this mental object. And the Buddha is teaching you to have awareness of all 4 of these things, because that's what's going to allow you to essentially transform the mind and uproot the craving, desire, attachment, and all the fetters out of the mind. Okay, I see your thumbs up. Okay. All right, let me see if we have anything in Facebook or YouTube. All right, I'm not seeing anything there. So let's go to chapter 17. Would someone like to read this one? Okay, looks like Chris. Go ahead, sir.
Craving is the basis for coming and going, which is the cause of discontentedness. Monks, what one intends and what one desires, and whatever one has an obsession towards, this becomes a basis for the maintenance of consciousness. When there is a basis, there is a support for the establishing of consciousness. When consciousness is established and has come to growth, there is impulse. When there is impulse, there is coming and going. When there is coming and going, there is passing away and being reborn. When there is passing away and being reborn, future birth, aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair come to be. Such is the cause of this whole mass of discontentedness. If, monks, one does not intend and one does not desire, but one still has obsession towards something, this becomes a basis for the maintenance of consciousness. When there is a basis, there is a support for the establishing of consciousness. When consciousness is established and has come to growth, there is impulse. When there is impulse, there is coming and going. When there is coming and going, there is passing away and being reborn. When there is passing away and being reborn, future birth, age and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair come to be. Such is the cause of this whole mass of discontentedness.
Okay, thank you, sir. So this is similar to the previous discourse that we were just studying, but the Buddha is talking about this coming and going. So let's discuss what that is. If you've ever been somewhere and you just didn't feel content there and you just felt like you had to go, right? Like maybe you're at home and you just had this impulse, this overwhelming urge to just go outside and do something. This is the coming and going, that the mind is not comfortable and content in the present moment, that it has to always be somewhere else, that there's this next trip that the mind wants to take. It's kind of like the grass is always greener on the other side. It's not just that, hey, let's go enjoy a travel, let's go check this out or check that out. It's like the mind just isn't content. The mind is restless and it just can't be there in that particular location with contentedness and peacefulness and joy. So this is the coming and going, where the mind is never quite content where it's at. It always feels like it needs to be somewhere else. By the time you eliminate craving, desire, attachment, there's no longer this coming and going. This coming and going has all been extinguished, that there isn't this impulse. You'll still travel, you'll still go do things, you'll still go out on the town perhaps and see different things, but you can be content staying at home, you can be content somewhere else and going to do something. You're content where you're at, you're just choosing to go do something else. So you need to pay attention to the mind, that if you're acting upon impulses and you just have this impulse to go do something or purchase something or be somewhere, this is the mind's craving, desire, attachment. And this is why it's really important to slow down one's decision making, because if you're making a bunch of decisions really rapidly, particularly big life decisions like where you work, where you live, significant relationships and things like this, if you make these decisions really quickly, you could maybe be acting upon impulse rather than wise decision making. So you would like to be able to observe the mind with your mindfulness to determine what is the motivation behind this particular decision that you're about to make. And when you're in a situation where you're experiencing a lot of stress or anxiety or things like this, it's really important to slow down your decision making, put the brakes on it even, and not even make any decisions at all. Your decision can be, I'm not going to make any decisions whatsoever because the mind is not well. If the mind is experiencing discontentedness, that means craving, anger, and ignorance is potentially circulating in the mind, and that's not the wise time to be making decisions. So you can slow things down for a few hours, for a few days, even a week or two. There are certain decisions that I've waited multiple months before I made. I thought about those decisions for multiple months before I finally decided a certain thing and then implemented it. And when you're doing it that way, your mind won't waver. Whereas if you're making really quick decisions, your mind will be confused and you will waver, where you're not quite sure on what your decisions are, and you will kind of be wavering on your decisions, that you're not fully confident that your decision's well thought out. So that's what you would like to do, is really restrain the mind and slow down. Don't act upon these impulses, and be aware of this coming and going, that the mind's going to always maybe potentially feel like you're not comfortable in the present moment. There's always something else that the mind is longing, yearning for. And you would like to be able to get to the point where the mind can be stilled and quieted, and you're not acting upon impulses. All these other things are fairly similar to what we've been studying previously, but if you have questions on anything, just let me know. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom. Vibhav has a question. Go ahead, sir.
David, do you think we can go to the previous chapter, a question on dependent origination?
Sure.
So, I guess what we're saying in dependent origination is, and you said that's describing the process of birth. So when I'll just fast forward to the place where we have the sixth. So when a consciousness is established in the womb as a name and form, and that develops the sixth and basis, and as a baby is forming, and that basically then has contact with the in the mother's womb, contact with all the stuff around it, and that creates a feeling of maybe a pleasant feeling of being in a nice place for the baby, and that really then produces a craving for being in that situation, and also clinging, right? Am I explaining correctly? And
yes,
that causes sorry.
Yes, but it's important to understand that craving already exists in the mind at the time of birth.
Yes, that's why the baby was in the womb. Like consciousness was formed anyway, and there's craving, and then craving produces clinging. So I guess my question was: is there a possibility that while the baby is in the womb, that it gets rid of the craving, and then it won't be born, and it gets to enlightenment? Is that possible or not possible?
Yeah, there are situations like that. Like a being can get to enlightenment either during life or at death, right? So if there's a being that's inside the womb that has an existence, but it just hasn't been born out into the world yet, it could be a miscarriage, right? And now a being could actually get to enlightenment at that point, and now they're not going to be reborn over again.
So how would a baby get rid of, because there's already some craving, that's why it's in the womb, right? That's already in the consciousness.
Yep.
So how would someone just being formed get rid of that craving enough that maybe it's a minute craving that they have, and then get to enlightenment?
Yeah, this is residual craving. The Buddha describes it as attaining enlightenment upon landing, right? Like once the consciousness lands, now maybe there's one craving left. Maybe that craving was that it wanted to get to a new existence. And now one of the ways that you extinguish a craving is to actually fulfill it. So now let's just say that it had extinguished all its craving except for this one craving for existence. And now maybe it landed into the mom's womb, and now it extinguished that craving, and now it gets to enlightenment. That's not the way it always is going to happen, but it can happen. It's a possibility.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, it looks like Chris has a question here. He says, can you explain more in depth what impulse is? This is another word for craving, desire, attachment. This is like the overwhelming urge where the mind is longing, yearning for something external, where it acts upon this impulse, where the mind just thinks of something and boom, it just does it right away, rather than thinking through whether this thing would be wise or unwise. It's a real quick reaction rather than thinking it through. So you could think of the word craving, desire, attachment here as well. So the Buddha sometimes is going to use different words. Here he's using impulse because that's something that the mind experiences as well when there's craving, desire, attachment. But when there's no craving, desire, attachment, there's no impulse, right? So if you think back to your childhood or maybe even now, you might have walked out of your house without your car keys, and then right away you remember you left your car keys, and you have this impulse to turn around and run back into the house. That's the mind's craving, desire, attachment. Whereas if, as an enlightened being, you walked out of the house and you're like, I forgot my keys. I'm going to turn around and go get those. And you'll just take your time to go back into the house and get them rather than to, bolt off back into the house. That's what the impulse or the craving is going to do to the mind. You're going to feel like you want to bolt back into the house. But that's where you can trip and fall. You can, be bracing your fall and break your wrist or your elbow. All these unwholesome things are going to happen whenever you're functioning through craving, desire, attachment, or this impulse. Looks like Marcy has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. I was just actually going to ask you, impulses coming from the subconscious mind, but as I'm reflecting, those moments where the subconscious mind pops up, I guess it wouldn't really be like an impulse. It would just be an uncontrolled thought or an uncontrolled speech or action that would pop up out of the subconscious, correct?
You can have impulses in the conscious mind or the subconscious mind. By the time you get to that second jhana, though, there's a unification of the mind. There's only one mind. You can see the whole mind. But prior to that, your subconscious mind can throw things up into your conscious mind, and then the being is acting upon that. So in order to act upon something, it would have to be in your conscious mind. So your subconscious mind can throw things up into your conscious mind, and now you act upon it. And that could be an impulse that we might say is from the subconscious mind.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, looks like Mayu Lee on Facebook has a question. When there's a miscarriage, does that count as one existence for that being? Yes, as soon as all of the things have come together into the womb, that now forms an existence. It hasn't been born yet, but it is an existence. Mayu Lee has another one. She says, for example, for one seeder, does miscarriage count as one existence that can get to enlightenment after that? Yeah, if somebody was a one seed turner or one seed attainer, if that consciousness comes into a name and form, into the body, and forms the body and a consciousness together in the womb, and there's a miscarriage, then that means that being has then gotten to enlightenment. That would be an example of a being that could do that from Vibhav's question. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. So let's go to the next one, which is chapter 18. Looks like Pat's volunteering here. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. The end of coming and going. For him who clings, there is wavering. For him who does not cling, there is no wavering. Having eliminated wavering, there is calm. Calm being present, there is no bending. Having eliminated bending, there is no coming and going to birth. Having eliminated coming and going, there is no death and rebirth. Having eliminated death and rebirth, there is no here or there, or anything between the two. This indeed is the end of discontentedness.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. So this is essentially what we were just talking about, how craving and clinging, the mind is longing and yearning, and you might be making really quick decisions, not really thinking those through. And because they're not really well thought out, the mind can easily waver back and forth. And that's not what you're interested in. You're interested in having well-collected thought. right? Just to get to the first stage of enlightenment, the Buddha talks about this, that an individual who's in the first stage of enlightenment will have well-collected thought. They will be thinking through their decisions and implementing decisions that are well thought out. And that's how you're going to get to the extinguishing of all your unwholesome karma and the production of only wholesome karma, that you have well-collected thought. But if there's a lot of craving and clinging in the mind, you won't think through your decisions because the mind's chasing those pleasant feelings and it's just trying to hurry up and get to these pleasant feelings. And that's where the mind is making these really rapid decisions. And that's where you can be halfway into a decision or a quarter or 3/4 of the way into a decision, and your mind can waver and you can change your mind. Whereas if you've done the time that you need to really think through your decisions before you implement something, you can know that this is what you would like to implement, and now your mind won't waver. And this is where you'll find that you're much more productive in life. Sometimes people think that quick, rapid decisions are going to be productive. In fact, some work environments are motivating people to make those quick, rapid decisions. But because of that, you ultimately end up making unwise decisions in some cases, and you need to circle back around and clean up the mess. Whereas if you take your time and think through the decisions that you're making, now you can have confidence in the decision that you're making and not waver on this. Right? So the Buddha is talking about here that when you eliminate the wavering, there is calm. And then what he's meaning by that is that if you've eliminated your wavering of decision making, that means that you've eliminated your craving and clinging. And that's why the mind is calm, because you can know that this is a wise decision. And no matter how somebody tries to influence you one way or the other, or tries to tell you how wrong you are for doing this or doing that, or gosh, stop doing this to me, people will blame you for the things that they're experiencing. And your mind might waver on that if you don't know with 100% certainty that you're making a wise decision. But if you know you're making a wise decision, your mind won't waver on your decisions, and you can just calmly implement them. And then calm being present, there is no bending. What the Buddha means by that is changing your decisions, is switching things around, kind of bending things here and there. Right? So having no bending, there's no coming and going. He just goes through the cause and effect, essentially helping you to understand that this is what an enlightened being is experiencing, because they've ended discontentedness. That an enlightened being doesn't waver, they're not clinging, they're not having this bending where they're bending their decisions back and forth, and then all of these other things as well, because this is the end of discontentedness. So in order to do this, you're going to need to think through your decisions and make sure they're well thought out. And even if other people are putting pressure on you to hurry up and make a decision, you don't have to bend to that. You don't have to give in to that. Right? So you can just understand that, hey, I need this time here. And if other people are getting discontent because you're taking your time to make a decision, you're not causing that discontentedness. They don't understand what you're practicing necessarily, that you're looking to make 100% wise decisions. And if they're trying to push you and push you and push you to make a decision, that's because they're trying to get to pleasant feelings. And if you give them what they want, they're going to get happy. And if you don't give them what they want, they're going to get angry and sad and frustrated. So instead of trying to please other people, which is what the mind will tend to do, instead, take the time to make a wise decision for yourself and know that this is the best decision for you in this situation. It's not selfish to be thinking about yourself and making sure that this being is well. If you're only thinking about other people and you're not thinking about this being, or if the decisions you're implementing are good for others and they're not good for you, then they're not good. They're not wise decisions, right? You need to be able to make decisions that are beneficial and helpful for everyone involved where possible, but at least they need to be beneficial for yourself. And this isn't selfish. Oftentimes we're taught that if we're making decisions in our own best interest, that's selfish. That's not selfish. That's making sure you have loving kindness and compassion for this being. If you're exhausting yourself, exhausting your resources, if you're nose to the grindstone, if you're somehow sacrificing your own wellness for the benefit of others, there's no esteem for that. There's no honor in sacrificing yourself for other people, because ultimately you're going to be depleted and you're not going to be helpful for anybody in the world. So you need to be able to be willing to take your time and get to a beneficial decision for yourself. And if other people benefit from that decision, great, that's wonderful. So let me know what questions that you guys have on this one. Looks like Chris has a question. Go ahead, sir.
So I can actually sense in the mind that the mind is wavering, like it's going back and forth. So even if I, like, for example, in terms of arising more energy and getting more work done and cleaning and doing things that arise an enlightenment factor of energy, sometimes it seems like I need to hurry up and start making progress so that I could arise energy and make progress on the path to enlightenment. But even with that, is it better to observe the mind wavering and kind of let the wavering settle and relax before taking action and making decisions?
Yes, 100%, Chris. If your mind's craving to get to enlightenment, you've got to restrain that and understand that you'll never get to enlightenment with a craving. You can't hurry up and get to enlightenment. So, yes, wherever you see the mind's wavering and shaking back and forth, put the brakes on and don't make any decisions, because there's the potential that you're going to make an unwise decision, and now it's just going to produce unwholesome dhamma that you have to deal with. You got to get to the point where you're making wise decisions, understanding that you're going to have mishaps here and there, but any kind of unwise decision that you put out, you're just going to have to deal with the consequences of that, and that's more for you to go back and clean up later. So it's better to take your time and just really make sure, like you heard me share, that there's some decisions that I've made that took me multiple months to decide what I was going to do in any one given situation. I had a certain idea, I had a certain thoughts, I was thinking about it for a period of time, but ultimately I didn't make the ultimate decision for multiple months down the road, because there was never a period of time at any time prior to that where I was confident in the decision making that I was looking at making, and I needed to make sure that I was 100% confident before I implemented this decision. So if you ever see the mind wavering and teeter-tottering like that, then that means the thought in the decision isn't well thought out. So take your time, restrain the mind if it's craving to do any particular thing, and just be sure that you understand that that's the very best thing you can do to ensure 100% wise decision making. Okay, so it looks like Chris also has a question in the comment section. He says, this sounds like Gotama Buddha is talking about composure here and equanimity when he talks about not wavering. Yeah, that's what one would have by the time they get to enlightenment. What he's describing here is some of the qualities of an enlightened being, and the composure, the equanimity, the tranquility of the mind, that's all going to be there because the mind's no longer wavering. Those are all aspects of the enlightened mind. So the Buddha's not giving you one discourse where he's describing everything about the enlightened mind. If you put together the totality of his teachings, you can see all these different qualities. I kind of have at times where I describe a large majority of the qualities of the enlightened mind, but even still, there's other qualities that I talk about in other discourses. So here he's just talking about certain aspects of the enlightened mind. But yes, he's talking about equanimity. Okay. I don't see any other questions anywhere. So let's go to the next chapter, which is chapter 19. Would somebody like to read this? Okay, Keely. Go ahead, ma'am. Oops.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Excitement is clinging. One with clinging is not liberated. Here, monks, one seeks excitement in form, welcomes it, and remains holding to it. As a consequence of this, excitement arises. Excitement in form is clinging. One seeks excitement in feeling, welcomes it, and remains holding to it. As a consequence of this, excitement arises. Excitement in feeling is clinging. One seeks excitement in perception, welcomes it, and remains holding to it. As a consequence of this, excitement arises. Excitement in perception is clinging. One seeks excitement in volitional formation, choices, decisions, welcomes it, and remains holding to it. As a consequence of this, excitement arises. Excitement in volitional formation is clinging. One seeks excitement in consciousness, welcomes it, and remains holding to it. As a consequence of this, excitement arises. Excitement in consciousness is clinging. With one's clinging as condition, existence comes to be. When existence as condition, birth. With birth as condition, aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair come to be. Such is the cause of this whole mass of discontentedness. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So here, the Buddha is talking about clinging to the five aggregates. We're talking a little bit about this with Kushi, is that there's these five collections or five criteria or these five elements, oftentimes referred to as the five aggregates. You can think of these as criteria, that every living being is going to have these, including this being who you are. And it's helpful for you to know what the five aggregates are, as I mentioned with Kushi, so that you know how to practice the first precept, that you can live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, and you're not causing harm to living beings. Another reason why it's helpful to know these is that your mind can cling to these because you have all five of these. And sometimes the mind doesn't see this particular clinging. So the physical form, you understand that is the physical form of the body. Then there's feelings like the pleasant, painful, neither painful nor pleasant. Like someone might say like, I am happy, or I am sad, or I am frustrated. And now the mind can cling to these feelings, especially the pleasant ones, right? The mind can cling to these, and that's what the Buddha is talking about here. Then there's certain perceptions in the mind. These are your views and opinions about the world. This is where someone might cling to a political perception, their view and opinion, or a certain perception of other people and how they think people are and how they function. There's certain clinging that you can cling to these perceptions. Whereas if you have a certain political party that you associate with or a certain view or opinion, you might get really excited that you identify with this particular perception, and your mind can cling to that. Then there are certain choices and decisions that you make, that you might cling to your choices and decisions. Like say you chose to go on a holiday 6 months from now, and now as you purchased your plane tickets and you got closer and closer and closer, you don't have money for the hotel and the food and everything else, but you're clinging to that decision to go, and you don't want to let go of that decision, and you end up driving yourself into massive amounts of debt in order to go on this particular holiday. Or say that you're clinging to a certain boyfriend or girlfriend, or a certain living environment, or a certain pair of shoes or jewelry or something like this, certain decisions that you've made. You might be clinging to these kinds of things and not be willing to let go. And the mind gets excited when you're holding on to these things. But the mind letting go, it can experience the peace and joy that whether you have these choices and decisions to go through with them, you can feel peace and joy. But if you choose not to do these certain things, like you choose not to go on this holiday, then you can be peaceful and joyful with that too. But if you're getting so excited about this holiday that you're getting ready to take, and then you choose not to go, you'll probably be sad and frustrated and lonely and bored when you choose not to go. That's the problem with clinging to your decisions. Also, if you make a decision, whether it's like a professional decision or a personal decision that's really far in advance, well, between now and then, there's a whole lot of impermanence that's happening. And if you cling to your decision, you'll be unwilling to evaluate this impermanence, the things that have changed, and you'll be unwilling to change your decision, even though there's been all these changes that would make your current decision that you made 6 months ago unwise. That the mind will just cling to this decision just because of the fact that it made this decision. Instead, if you get to the present moment where you're getting ready to implement a decision and things have changed and now that decision is no longer wise, then just don't implement that decision. Change your decision, right? That's what the Buddha teaches you, is not to cling to these decisions. And then there's the consciousness itself, which is the mind. So the mind can cling to an identity within one's own mind. So whenever there's clinging, there's going to be existence, there's going to be birth, there's going to be sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. So these five aggregates are something that you're going to need to eliminate its clinging to. And this is where the mind is forming its personal existence view, by clinging to these five aggregates. That if you cling to the physical form, if you cling to the feelings, your perceptions, your choices and decisions, or the consciousness, you might identify with this as who you are as a person. Like, I am a Democrat, or I am a Republican, or I am this, or I am that, or I am angry, I am frustrated. Any of this, I am an alcoholic. No, I'm not an alcoholic. I used to make choices and decisions before to drink alcohol, and I did it excessively, which was unwise, but I don't need to label myself as being an alcoholic just because I chose to drink at some point in, 25 years ago or 20 years ago. We don't have to identify with these things as who we are. And now that'll free up the mind of having to be discontent. If someone has trauma in their mind, if they've experienced physical abuse or sexual abuse or things like this in their past, they might identify with that as who they are. I am a victim. And now the mind holds on to that victim mentality, and it keeps experiencing painful feelings over and over and over again because it keeps forming feelings based on things that happened in the past, where you can train your mind to let that go and not identify with that as who you are as a person. And now you can reside more peaceful and joyful. So let me know what questions you guys have here. It looks like we have some questions coming in. Let's see. It looks like Chris has something here on Zoom about not wavering. Is waiting for the mind to stop wavering and observing the mind as it wavers until it stops wavering part of thinking and pondering? No, when the Buddha talks about thinking and pondering in the jhanas, what he's talking about is how once you're in the jhanas, the mind will tend to look at any given situation that you're encountering, and you will think and ponder about the teachings and how to actually implement the teachings in that situation. So that's what thinking and pondering is, that you're evaluating the teachings and investigating them to figure out what particular set of the teachings or what aspect of the teachings can you apply to this situation. It's like kind of trying to figure out this new mind and how to apply these teachings in these situations, because you haven't been in these situations before with this new wisdom on board. So you need to think and ponder about how would you do this thing now that you know the teachings, where before you might have haphazardly went through life not really thinking through the decisions that you're making, where by the time you get to the jhanas, there's this thinking and pondering where you consider the teachings before you make any decision in any given situation. Is being aware of the mind wavering part of the 4 foundations of mindfulness in terms of the awareness of restlessness or anything else? Yes, when that restlessness is in the mind, that 9th fetter, that's the mind having the awareness of that mental object. That's the mental object of restlessness that the mind is now aware of. Looks like Marcy has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Just raising my hand to read next, Teacher David, if there's another chapter.
Oh,
no
okay.
Question.
Yeah, let me just check. We don't have any more questions. So yeah, I think we have one more chapter today. So here we go. Oh, this is the Eightfold Path. So what I typically do with the Eightfold Path when we reach this point in the Pali Canon English study group, because it shows up multiple times in the books, is I just see if there's any questions that you guys have on the Eightfold Path. Because as you guys know from the foundational classes, it takes about 2.5 hours for me to teach this thoroughly. So if there's any aspect of the path that you're not familiar with or you would like to ask questions about, you can ask those now. We're not going to read it because usually students learn it in the foundational classes, and by the time they get to the Pali Canon English study group, it's just kind of tightening it up here and there. So let me know if you guys have any questions on the Eightfold Path at all. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So what I'll do then is just end class by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you to everyone who read. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your interest to learn and grow and develop on the path. Next week, we're going to be in the next 10 chapters, which is going to be chapters 21 through 30. So if you'd like to read those before class or after class, there's always that option, because what I teach in class is just a small snippet of what I actually teach in the written content. So if you'd like to read the books, you can download them for free. You can take them and go print them. You can get them on Amazon, or you can get them at our temple here in Chiang Mai. We just help to get the books for you, and then you just kind of reimburse us for the printing cost. So if you read either before or after class, this will really help you to fully understand each chapter and be able to glean the most insight and wisdom to be able to then practice it. Tomorrow in the group learning program, we're going to be in Volume 1, Chapter 21, which is titled Do No Harm, What is the Future of the Planet? I'm going to lead a discussion on Sunday evening in order to kind of talk about the condition of the planet. Tomorrow morning at the temple, I'm going to be teaching the Four Noble Truths so that students can learn the Four Noble Truths. So if you attend in the morning class, either online or in person, it's going to be the Four Noble Truths. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to be doing loving kindness meditation with students and opening up to any and all questions that you guys might have related to the path to enlightenment. So thank you all for your questions. Thank you for your interest to learn, and perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and take care. Sawadee Kap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.